Dear friends, have you ever stopped to think how a single decision can completely change the course of a life? How a moment of kindness, even when all seems lost, can open doors we never knew existed. The story I'm going to tell you today actually happened. Mary S.B. Selter, a 34-year-old widow, was just 30 days away from losing everything she had in her life. Her home, her livelihood, and worst of all, custody of her two young children. Mary had tragically lost her husband just 6 months earlier. Richard, the love of her life since she was 18, was brutally murdered by bandits who broke into her home on a cold September morning. They took not only his life, but all the money that would have been used to save the family business. Now, with debts impossible to pay and a cruel loan shark threatening to take her children from her, Mary was at her limit. Until one day, a complete stranger stopped at her abandoned gas station asking for help. What she didn't know was that this man carried secrets that would not only change her life, but would reveal surprising connections to her husband's death. Secrets that not even in her wildest dreams could she have imagined. But before I tell you this incredible story that will restore your faith in humanity, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any of our exciting stories. And share this video with your friends, because stories like this need to be told and retold. Prepare your hearts, dear ones, because what you're about to hear today will prove that miracles still happen, that goodness still exists, and that sometimes angels show up just when we need them most, even in the most unexpected ways. It all started on an ordinary Tuesday in a small town in the countryside, when Mary woke up without knowing that that would be the day that would divide her life into a before and an after. Day to day. To understand the magnitude of what happened to Mary, we need to know her daily reality. A routine of survival that had become a constant struggle against despair. Mary woke up every morning at 5 not because she wanted to, but because the weight of her worries kept her awake. Her first thought upon opening her eyes was always the same: how am I going to get through another day? His house was behind the gas station that had been in the family for 3 generations. Richard's grandfather had built that station in the 1960s, when the road was still dirt and travelers stopped not just to fill up, but to rest and chat. Richard always told Mary how, in his grandfather's time, the station was bustling with activity. Truckers traveling between cities, families traveling to visit relatives, young lovers on their first trips together. The station was a meeting place, a place where stories were shared and friendships were born. But those golden days were long gone. By the time Richard inherited the station, the main road had been diverted, and a large national gas station had been established on the new route. Customers gradually dwindled, until only local neighbors remained, who still frequented the place out of loyalty and affection for the family. Now Mary walked every morning through the once thriving gas station and saw only the signs of decay. The once shiny, modern gas pumps were rusted, and only 2 of the 4 pumps were working. The paint on the small convenience store was peeling, and many of the shelves remained empty because she couldn't afford to restock. Peter, her 10-year-old son, had become a boy far too serious for his age. He helped his mother without being asked, carried heavy bags, looked after his younger sister, and Mary saw in his eyes a concern that should not be present in a child. She often found him awake in the early hours of the morning, sitting by the window, looking at the empty road as if waiting to see his father come home. 8-year-old Anna still retained some of her childlike innocence, but her innocent questions were like knives to Mary's heart. "Mommy, why are you crying so much? When will Daddy be back? Why did that man yell at you yesterday?" Mary didn't know how to explain to a child that the world is sometimes too cruel for us to understand. Mary's routine had become a series of small daily battles. Waking up at 5 to make coffee with the sugar that was already running low. Opening the store at 6, even though she knew no customers would probably come until late. Rearranging the same products on the shelves, more out of habit than necessity. At 9 o'clock sharp, like a sacred ritual, Donna Laura, her 70-year-old neighbor, would appear. She always bought something small, a soda, a package of cookies, a chocolate bar, but Mary knew it wasn't for the goods. Donna Laura came because she could see that Mary needed company, someone to remind her that she wasn't completely alone in the world yet. "How are the children today, my daughter?" Donna Laura would always ask, with that loving voice of someone who has raised 7 children and understands a mother's heart. "They're fine, Mrs. Laura. Peter is helping a lot, and Anna? Well, Anna continues to be our little source of joy. And you, my dear? How is your heart?" Mary always replied that she was fine, but her frequent tears and empty gaze betrayed the white lie. Donna Laura understood and never insisted. She just stayed there, chatting about pleasantries, bringing a bit of normalcy to those impossible days. Every afternoon, after the simple lunch she managed to prepare with what little she had, Mary sat at the kitchen table to face her greatest torture: the bills. They arrived daily, like soldiers marching into a battle she knew she could not win. Electricity bill 2 months overdue. Water bill with a notice of disconnection. Suppliers charging for goods she had purchased in the last days of her husband's life, when she still had hoped that everything would work out. Gas station taxes piling up like a paper avalanche. But there was one debt that terrified her more than all the others combined. A debt that made her wake in the middle of the night with her heart racing, that made her tremble every time she heard the sound of an unfamiliar car approaching. It was the debt owed to Mr. George, the most feared moneylender in the entire region. A man with a rough, unfriendly face, and whose reputation for cruelty was known throughout the neighboring towns. Richard had turned to him in desperation, in the last months of his life, when the banks had already refused any kind of loan. $30,000. An amount that, for anyone, would be a normal amount, something like a dream trip. But for Mary it was a death sentence. An amount so impossible to achieve that she sometimes wondered if it wouldn't be better to simply disappear with the children and start over somewhere else. But how to start over without money? How to support 2 children without a roof, without a job, without documents? What if George found her? The stories that went around about what he did to those who didn't pay their debts were enough to keep anyone awake at night. Worst of all was the loneliness. Mary felt as if she were on a desert island, crying out for help to an empty ocean that never responded. The friends she and Richard had had during their marriage had gradually disappeared after the funeral. Some because they didn't know what to say, others because they were uncomfortable with the situation, and many simply because life went on for them while hers seemed to have stopped in time. The only constant companions were Donna Laura, who appeared religiously every day, and Father Lien, who stopped by weekly for a chat and prayer. But even they, with all the goodwill in the world, could not solve the financial problem that was growing like a devouring monster. Mary spent her afternoons sitting on the back porch, watching the children play with the few toys they still had, and wondering how she would explain to them that they might have to leave. How would she tell Peter, who already showed so much love for this place filled with memories of his father, that they might have to leave everything behind? It was in this state of silent despair that Mary had lived for 6 months. 6 months of sleepless nights, of increasingly simple meals, of hopes that died a little more each day. Until that Tuesday in June arrived when everything changed. The unexpected. Tuesday, June 15th. Mary would remember this date for the rest of her life, not only because it was when her luck began to change, but because it was the day she discovered that the universe sometimes conspires in our favor in completely unexpected ways. At 7, Peter woke up and came to have breakfast. A smart boy, he had already realized that his mother was trying to hide the gravity of the situation from him, but she couldn't completely hide the worry in her 10-year-old eyes. "Mom, can I miss school today to help at the gas station?" he asked, as he often did. "No, my love. Your studies are more important. Your father always said that studying was the one thing no one could take away from you." At 9 o'clock sharp, like every day, Donna Laura appeared, walking slowly along the dirt road that led to the station. "Good morning, my daughter. How did you wake up today?" "Good morning, Mrs. Laura. We're fine, thank you." Donna Laura bought a guarana soda, the same one she bought every day, even though Mary knew she didn't particularly like guarana. It was just an excuse to stay there, to talk, to bring a little humanity to that increasingly lonely place. They talked for almost an hour. Donna Laura told her about her grandchildren, about the news in the neighborhood, about the cake recipe she wanted to teach Mary when she had more time. These were seemingly trivial conversations, but they worked like a balm for Mary's wounded soul. After Donna Laura left, the station returned to its usual silence. Mary organized and rearranged the products on the shelves, more for the sake of having something to do than out of necessity. She cleaned the already cleaned gas pumps, swept the already swept floor, and checked the prices, which hadn't changed since the previous month. At 11, a customer showed up. Mr. Oliver, a neighbor who always filled up at the station out of loyalty to his family. He put in only 10 liters, enough to get to town and back, and paid with coins counted out. Mary knew he wasn't in a bad situation either, but he remained loyal to the station out of friendship. "How are things, Mary?" he asked as she noted the sale in the little notebook where she kept track of the day's sales. "Slowly, Mr. Oliver. But we're getting there. If you need anything, just let me know. Richard was a good man, and you never forget your friends." Mary thanked him with a smile that tried to hide her tears. They were kind words, but she knew everyone in the area was struggling. No one was in a position to help anyone else. The midday sun was relentless. It was June, summer, and the heat rose from the paved road in visible waves that distorted the landscape. Anna had woken and was playing in the shade of the gas station with some old dolls, creating innocent stories where all the families were happy and all the parents came home at the end of the day. Mary sat on a plastic chair she'd placed in the shade and watched her daughter play. There was a strange peace in that moment. The warmth, the silence, the distant sound of birds, Anna talking to herself as she played. For a few minutes, Mary was able to forget her worries and simply be. It was exactly 2:15 in the afternoon when Mary heard a sound she hadn't heard in months. A deep, powerful sound that began as a distant murmur and grew into an unmistakable roar. A motorcycle. Not just any motorcycle. From the sound of the engine, it was something big, powerful, expensive. Mary looked up from the old magazine she was leafing through and looked toward the road. From the shimmering heat of the asphalt, like a mirage taking shape, a gleaming black Harley-Davidson emerged. It was a magnificent machine, all chrome, very large, the kind Mary only saw in movies or in the pages of the magazine she sometimes leafed through at the gas station. The motorcycle slowed down and pulled into the station gracefully, stopping right in front of the nearest gas pump. The engine's noise slowly died away, leaving a heavy silence in the air. The man who got off the motorcycle was impressive. Tall, maybe 42, with neatly cut black hair that gave him a distinguished air. He wore a genuine leather jacket that had clearly cost more than Mary had earned in several months, boots that gleamed even in the blazing sun, and a full-face helmet that reflected the sky like a mirror. Mary rose from her chair, dropping the magazine in her lap onto the floor, suddenly aware of the difference between worlds. This man clearly came from a world of luxury and sophistication, while she was just a widow struggling to survive in an abandoned gas station. But when he removed his helmet, everything changed. Mary saw not the face of someone arrogant or distant, but the features of a man clearly in trouble. There was blood running from a cut on his forehead, his hands were shaking slightly, and his eyes showed the same kind of desperation Mary knew all too well. "Sorry to bother you," he said, approaching with steps that tried to look firm but betrayed a certain uncertainty. "My name is William. I really need your help." His voice was polite, but there was a barely concealed urgency. Mary noticed that despite his wealthy appearance, he seemed genuinely lost. "Of course," she replied instinctively. "What happened?" "You're hurt. I was robbed a few kilometers ago. They took everything, my backpack, my documents, all my money. By some miracle, they left the motorcycle." There was something about the way he said the word, assaulted, that touched Mary deeply. It wasn't just what he said, but how he said it, with a mixture of shock, anger, and vulnerability that she recognized. It was the same mix of feelings she experienced when she lost Richard. "You need to take care of that wound," she said, entering the station. "Wait here, I'll get some bandages." When she returned with alcohol, cotton wool, and a Band-Aid, William was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. There was surprise there and something else, as if he wasn't used to genuine kindness. "It's going to hurt a little," she warned, wetting the cotton ball with alcohol. "I am accustomed to pain," he replied in a way that made Mary look at him more closely. As she gently cleaned the wound, Mary noticed details that had gone unnoticed at first glance. His hands, though well-groomed, bore small scars. His face, beneath its prosperous appearance, showed signs of someone who had faced hardship. And his eyes held an ancient sadness that no amount of makeup could hide. "Why are you helping me?" he asked, watching the care with which she tended his wound. "You don't know me. I could be anyone." Mary paused what she was doing and looked him straight in the eye. "Because I know what it's like to be lost and need help. And because my heart tells me you're a good person." It was then that William made the request that would change everything. "Can I fill up the bike and pay later? I promise I'll be back in 2 days. I know it's a lot to ask of a stranger, but—" He stopped talking and looked around, finally noticing the neglected state of the station, the half-empty shelves, the obvious signs of financial difficulties. "You're having trouble too," he said, not as a question but as an observation. And it was at that moment that Mary made the decision that would change her life forever. The hard reality. In that crucial moment, with William looking at her expectantly, Mary felt the world stop. It was as if time had frozen, giving her a few eternal seconds to make a decision that could either save her or destroy her utterly. "How much do you need?" she asked, surprising herself with the question. "A full tank would be ideal," William replied. "I need to get to a very important meeting. My friends have been waiting for me for hours and He stopped and shook his head. "Sorry, I shouldn't be telling you my problems, you clearly have your own." "What do you mean?" asked Mary. "I can see it in your eyes. I've been in desperate situations. I recognize the look in your eyes when you're fighting against the world." It was then that something broke inside Mary. Maybe it was the exhaustion of carrying everything alone for so many months. Maybe it was the relief of finally finding someone who understood her pain without judgment. Or maybe it was simply the basic human need to share the burden. "My husband died 6 months ago," she began, her voice breaking. "We were robbed. They broke into our house in the middle of the night. Richard tried to protect us, but they had guns." William stood completely still, his eyes fixed on Mary's face with an intensity she could not comprehend. "They took all the money we had borrowed to renovate the station. Richard died trying to fulfill a dream, and now I'm here, with impossible debts to pay and 2 small children to raise alone." "How much do you owe?" William asked, his voice strangely controlled. $30,000, Mary whispered, as if saying the number aloud would make it even more real and frightening. "To you who clearly have the means it may seem small. But to me, it's like asking me to move a mountain with my bare hands." William was silent for a long moment. Mary saw something change in his expression, a coldness that contrasted with the vulnerability he had shown earlier. "The men who broke into your home, could you describe them?" The question took Mary by surprise. "Why do you want to know?" "Just curious. Does this area have a problem with this type of crime?" Mary hesitated. There was something in the way he asked that didn't seem casual. "There were 3 men. One tall and thin, one short and chubby, and the third had a scar on his face that ran from his forehead to his chin." The effect of the description on William was instantaneous. His fists clenched, a vein pulsed in his forehead, and for a moment Mary saw a coldness in his eyes that made her take a step back. "Do you know them?" she asked, her heart racing. "Maybe," he replied, his expression returning to a more controlled expression. "But that's not important right now. What's important is that you help me, and I promise I'll repay you in ways you can't even imagine." "I don't have money for gas right now," William continued, "but I have this." He took from the inside pocket of his jacket a simple gold ring, but one that clearly had sentimental value. It was a man's wedding band, plain, with something engraved on the inside that Mary couldn't see. "This ring is worth much more than the fuel. Keep it as collateral until I return." Mary tried to refuse. "There's no need for this. If you say you'll come back, I trust you." "No," he insisted. "It's a matter of honor. I always pay my debts, one way or another." Mary talked about her life with Richard, about their dreams for the position, about how the children were coping with the loss of their father. And William listened to every word with an attention that went beyond politeness, as if every detail mattered to him. During their conversation, Mary noticed some strange things. William knew details about the area that didn't seem befitting someone who was just passing through. He mentioned specific places, knew the names of nearby towns, and occasionally asked very specific questions about routes and roads. When Mary commented on the large network station that had been built on the new main road, William asked, "Do they have security cameras?" "I think so," she replied. "Why do you ask?" "Just professional curiosity," he said, but the answer didn't completely convince Mary. When the tank was full, William insisted that Mary keep the ring, but he made a strange request. "If anything happens to me if I can't get back in 2 days, I want you to find a man named Marcus at the motorcycle shop in town. Tell him William sent it and show him this ring. He'll know what to do." "Why are you talking like that?" Mary asked, suddenly worried. "Is something going to happen to you?" "I hope not," he replied, putting on his helmet. "But in life, you never know what's around the next bend." Before he left, William did something unexpected. He took a picture of the gas station with his cell phone, but not a casual photo. A careful photo that included the license plates, the pump numbers, even the family nameplate that hung at the entrance. "Why are you taking pictures?" Mary asked. "So I don't forget the place where I met an angel," he replied, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. 2 days, Mary. I promise that in 2 days everything will be different for you." She looked at the ring in her hands. It was heavier than it looked, and there was something engraved on the inside that she could now see better. "Forever United in B and WB," it was a wedding band. Why would a married man go around without his wedding ring, just to offer it as collateral? Mary thought. And why did he know so many details about our area? And those questions about the robbers? The more he thought about the encounter, the more questions arose in his mind. William didn't seem like just some unlucky tourist. There was something calculated in his questions, something purposeful in his presence there. That night, Mary couldn't sleep. She sat at the window, staring at the road, replaying every word of her conversation with William. Then she saw something that made her question even more. A black car had driven slowly past the gas station 3 times during the night. The first time she thought it was a coincidence. The second time she was alert. The third time she was sure someone was watching the station. But why? And did it have anything to do with William? On Wednesday, Mary woke up even more anxious. It wasn't just the anticipation of William's return. It was a growing feeling that she had gotten herself into something dangerous without realizing it. The day passed slowly. In the afternoon, a strange man appeared at the gas station. Tall, thin, dressed expensively, but with a cold gaze that sent a shiver down her spine. He only bought a soda, but he kept looking around with excessive attention. "Are you Mary?" he asked before he left. "Yes, why?" "Just confirming. Have a good day." The doubt. Thursday dawned with a heaviness in the air that Mary couldn't explain. It was as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. And she wasn't wrong to feel that tension, because that day would be decisive. "I'm fine, my love. Just waiting for a customer who promised to come back today." But Mary wasn't just worried about William. During the night, she had remembered details of the conversation that hadn't caught her attention at the time, but which now seemed very significant. When William asked about the robbers, his reaction wasn't one of casual curiosity. It was one of recognition. Mary was absolutely certain he knew these men. But how? And why? Furthermore, the way he asked about security cameras, escape routes, and traffic times in the area, these weren't the questions of a normal tourist. They were the questions of someone who was planning something. Around 10 o'clock that morning, when Mary was sorting through some old papers in the counter drawer, she found something that made her freeze. A newspaper clipping Richard had saved 3 weeks before he died. The headline read, "Businessman Escapes Highway Kidnapping." The man who was unmistakably William, only under the name William P. Bredson, CEO of PB Industries. Mary had to sit down. Her legs shook so badly she nearly fell. William wasn't just a rich man who had been unlucky. He was one of the most powerful businessmen in the region. But then why had he lied about his identity? Why was he traveling alone on a back road? And why had he been so specific in his questions about the robbery that had killed Richard? She read the entire article, and the information left her even more confused. The article mentioned that William P. Brett's son had escaped a kidnapping planned by a gang that had been operating in the area for years. Police suspected that the same criminals were responsible for a series of robberies against local businesses and residents. The description of the suspects, Mary read aloud, includes a tall, thin man, a short, plump man, and a third with extensive facial scarring. It was exactly the description she had given William of Richard's killers. Suddenly, everything began to make frightening sense. William hadn't shown up at the station by chance. He knew exactly who she was, he knew about Richard's death, he knew about her financial difficulties. But why? What was his true purpose? Mary felt panic grip her. What if William was dangerous? What if he was somehow involved in Richard's death? What if his kindness was just a front for some sinister plan? She looked at the ring he had left as collateral. Now it seemed less a gesture of good faith and more evidence of something she couldn't comprehend. Why would such a wealthy man leave his wedding ring as collateral for a few gallons of gas? Mary decided she needed to know more. She picked up her cell phone and called the only person she knew who might have information, her brother-in-law Henry, who worked as a security guard for a cash-in-transit company. "Henry, I need you to help me with something. Do you know someone named William P. Brett's son?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Mary, why are you asking about him? He's a very powerful man, and they say he's very dangerous when crossed." "Dangerous how?" "Look, I don't know if I should be telling you this, but rumor has it he didn't build his empire on legitimate business deals alone. They say he has connections with some questionable people. And when someone wrongs him, his revenge is relentless." Mary's heart raced. What kind of revenge? "Mary, are you in trouble with him? Because if you are, you better leave town today." "No, I don't know. He showed up here yesterday asking for help, but now I found out he lied about who he was." "Has he been to your post?" "Mary, leave the house now. Take the children and go to our cousin Alice's house. Don't even wait to pack up." But it was too late to run. While Mary was still on the phone, she heard the unmistakable sound of cars approaching. Not one car, several cars. She ran to the window and saw a sight that made her blood run cold. 3 black cars were surrounding the gas station. Men in dark suits were getting out of the vehicles, and she recognized one of them. It was the man who had come the day before and asked her name. "Henry, there are people coming here. Turn off your phone and leave the house now." Henry shouted, but it was too late. The men positioned themselves strategically around the station. Mary ran to the children's room, but when she looked out the back window, she saw that there were men there too. They were completely surrounded. "Mother, who are those men?" asked Peter, who had noticed the movement. "Stay here with your sister," Mary said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Don't leave the room for anything." One of the men knocked on the front door. "Miss Mary, we need to talk. Please open the door." The voice was polite, but there was an underlying threat that made Mary tremble. She had no choice, she was cornered. When he opened the door, the man who appeared to be the leader of the group smiled coldly. "Miss Mary, my name is Marcus. I work for Mr. William P. Brett's son. I believe he was here yesterday." "Yes, he said he would be back today." "Ah, but he's not coming back. There's been a change of plans. And we've come to settle some outstanding issues." Marcus entered the station uninvited, followed by 2 other men. "Let's get straight to the point. My boss told us about your financial situation. About your debts to certain people in the area. I don't understand what this has to do with you." "It's all related. You see, Mr. Brett's son has business interests in this area. And certain illegal activities have been hurting his business. He's decided it's time to clean up." Mary felt the world spin around her. What kind of cleaning? The kind that involves people who owe money to loan sharks, disappearing. Forever. "But Mr. Brett's son is a fair man," Marcus continued. He recognizes that you have been kind to him. So he is offering you a choice. What choice? You can come with us now voluntarily and your children will be cared for by a family we know. They will have an education, food, a future. Or, well, we can settle it all at once. Mary understood the implicit threat and felt her strength leave her body. This was not a rescue, it was a kidnapping disguised as a favor. It was in this moment of utter despair that Mary remembered William's words. If anything happens to me, look for Marcus at the motorcycle shop in town. But this Marcus wasn't the one from the shop. He was William's henchman. It had all been a trap from the start. William had never intended to help her. He had used her kindness against her. I need some time to think, she said, trying to buy time. There's no time to think, Marcus replied. The decision needs to be made now. And it was exactly at that moment that the miracle happened. The nightmare. What happened next challenged everything Mary thought she knew about her situation. Because sometimes, when we think we've hit rock bottom, we discover there are forces working for us in ways we never could have imagined. Marcus had just said there was no time to think when a distant sound began to grow on the horizon. At first, Mary thought it was just another truck passing by on the main road. But the sound kept growing, and growing, and growing. "What's that noise?" asked one of Marcus's henchmen, glancing nervously at the window. Marcus frowned. He, too, had realized this was no ordinary vehicle. The sound was deep, rhythmic, and seemed to be coming from multiple sources. Suddenly, from the dusty horizon of the country road, a vision emerged that seemed to have been taken from an action movie. Not one, not two, but dozens of Harley-Davidson motorcycles, roaring in perfect synchrony, creating a symphony of power and intimidation. Mary ran to the window and couldn't believe her eyes. It was as if an army of modern-day horsemen were approaching, the afternoon sun creating a cinematic effect on the gleaming motorcycles. "How many are there?" Marcus asked, his voice trying to remain calm but betraying growing nervousness. I count at least 50, one of his men replied. "No. Wait, there are more. Much more." The motorcycles entered the station in perfect formation, like seasoned soldiers executing a maneuver rehearsed 1,000 times. They positioned themselves in concentric circles around the gas pumps, creating a human and metal barrier that completely isolated Marcus's black cars. The noise was deafening, but there was a mesmerizing synchronicity in the way all the bikes moved. It was like watching a choreographed dance, only with half-ton machines roaring at the top of their lungs. Mary counted quickly, 70 motorcycles. 70 men in leather jackets, 70 gleaming helmets, 70 pairs of hands in firm grips on the handlebars. From the center of the formation, a black Harley-Davidson, the same one Mary had seen 2 days earlier, stood out from the group. William dismounted with fluid movements, but now his presence was completely different. He was no longer the wounded, desperate man who had called for help. He was a born leader, a commander who radiated authority and power. His leather jacket now made sense. It wasn't the outfit of a rich man playing biker, it was a war uniform. "Marcus," William said, his voice cutting through the air like a sharp blade. "I'm glad you came in person. It'll make things much easier." Marcus tried to maintain his composure, but Mary saw sweat beginning to form on his forehead. "Mr. Breadson, there's been a misunderstanding. We were just clarifying some matters with you." "What questions?" William asked, approaching with measured steps. "The question of you killing her husband 6 months ago? The question of you terrorizing a defenseless widow? Or the question of you using my name to commit crimes I never authorized?" Mary felt the world spin around her. "What do you mean, using your name?" William turned to her, and now his eyes held a mixture of anger and compassion she hadn't seen before. "Mary, these men don't work for me. They are the very criminals who killed Richard. And they have been using my corporate identity to legitimize their criminal operations." "But you said your name was William?" "My name is William, yes. William P. Breadson. But I never hired these men. On the contrary, I've been working with the federal police for months to dismantle this gang." Marcus tried to back away, but realized he was completely surrounded by the 70 bikers. "You can't prove anything," he said, but his voice betrayed desperation. "Yes, I can," William replied, pulling a small device from his pocket. "Everything you've said here in the last 15 minutes has been recorded, including your confession to Richard's murder and your threat to kidnap Mary and her children." As if on cue, sirens began to wail in the distance. Several federal police cars appeared on the road, rapidly approaching the station. "3 months ago," William explained to Mary, "we received an anonymous tip about people using my company's name to commit crimes. We began a private investigation while the federal police mounted their own operation. When I learned of your husband's story, and that the criminals were the same ones who were tarnishing my reputation, I decided to take personal action." You planned all of this?" Mary asked, still trying to process everything. "The assault on me was real, but it wasn't a coincidence. I let these criminals think they had caught me by surprise, when in fact they were being tracked. I wanted to know all the places they frequented, all the people they threatened." "But why didn't you tell me the truth?" "Because I needed to know for sure what kind of person you were. If your kindness was genuine or if you were involved with them in some way. When you helped me, even though I was in terrible trouble, I knew I had found someone truly special." Federal police officers surrounded Marcus and his men. One of the agents approached. "William. Mr. Bread's son, did we get everything we needed?" "Everything and more," William replied, handing over the recording device. "We have a confession to murder, attempted extortion, a threat of kidnapping, and misuse of corporate identity. I think we're all going to get a good jail sentence." Marcus was handcuffed, but before he was taken away, he looked at Mary with hatred in his eyes. "You don't know who you're messing with," he shouted. "This isn't going to stand." "Don't worry about it," William said calmly. "Starting today, you and your children are under 24-hour protection from my security company. And these men, well, they're going to be away from society for a while." As the criminals were led away, the 70 bikers stood in formation, like silent guardians. Mary realized that these were not just William's friends, they were a truly elite force, ex-military and ex-police officers who had come together to fight injustice. Peter and Anna timidly emerged from their bedroom, wide-eyed at the epic scene unfolding in their backyard. 70 gleaming motorcycles, federal police officers, and at the center of it all, the man their mother had helped 2 days earlier, now revealed as a hero in disguise. "Mom," Peter asked, "is he one of the good guys?" Mary looked at William, who was now smiling genuinely for the first time since she had met him. "Yes, my love. He is definitely one of the good guys." But the biggest surprise was yet to come. The secret. William approached Mary, who was still trembling from the intensity of the events. "I know you must have a lot of questions," he said with a genuine kindness that was in stark contrast to the ruthless authority he had displayed minutes earlier. "Yes, I do," Mary replied, taking the hands of the children, who were holding close to her. "The first is, who are you really?" William smiled, but there was an old sadness in his eyes. "I am exactly who I said I was, William P. Bread's son, CEO of PB Industries. But that's only part of the story." "What war?" asked Mary. William gestured for the bikers to come closer. 10 years ago, I lost my wife and daughter in a robbery very similar to the one that happened to Richard. 3 men broke into our home, and when I tried to protect my family, that's when I decided to create my own justice system. I started bringing together men like me, people who had lost loved ones to violence, ex-military men disillusioned with bureaucracy, ex-police officers frustrated with the limitations of the legal system. One of the bikers, a large man with graying hair, approached. "I'm Colonel Bill," he said, extending his hand to Mary. "I lost my only son in a robbery 5 years ago. The killers were released due to lack of evidence. Since then, I've been working with William to make sure this doesn't happen to other families." Another biker introduced himself. "I'm Sergeant Newton. My sister was killed by a loan shark when she couldn't pay a debt. The police said it was an accident. We know the truth." One by one, several of the bikers shared their stories. All had lost someone loved to violence. All had found the legal system to be nothing but frustration and closed doors. And all had decided to take justice into their own hands. "How do you work?" Mary asked, fascinated and at the same time frightened by this revelation. "We receive complaints," William explained. "People like you who are being threatened or extorted. We investigate each case meticulously. And when we are certain someone is committing injustice, we take action. Always within the law," Colonel Bill quickly added. "We are not vigilantes. We are private investigators who work in coordination with federal authorities when necessary. But with one difference," William continued. "We don't give up. We don't accept lack of evidence. We don't settle for deals that let criminals go free." Mary looked around at all those men who had abandoned their ordinary lives to fight injustice. "But why me? Why was my case special?" William was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "Because when I read the police report about Richard's death, I saw my own story repeating itself. A good, hardworking man trying to protect his family. A wife and children left behind, without resources, without protection. And when I learned that you were being threatened by the same group that killed Richard, I decided it would stop here. With you. With your children." "So the assault on you?" Mary began. "It was planned down to the last detail," William confirmed. "We knew they were operating in this area. We knew their routes, their methods. I let them think they had caught me by surprise, when in fact their every move was being monitored. Including my coming here. I knew you were here, I knew your difficulties. But I needed to be sure what kind of person you were before proceeding." Mary remembered how gently she had tended his wound, how naturally she had offered help even when she was in trouble. "Was this a test?" "It was a verification," William corrected. "Unfortunately, we've encountered cases where people who claimed to be victims were actually involved with the criminals. I needed to make sure you were genuine." "What about Mr. George?" Mary asked, suddenly remembering the man who had been terrorizing her for months. William smiled coldly. Mr. George. He's in for a surprise very soon. We've discovered he's not just a loan shark. He's the financier of the entire criminal operation. The money he lends comes from robberies and extortions." "Will he be arrested?" "He will be arrested, tried and convicted. And all the debt Richard incurred with him will be cancelled, since it was obtained through illegal activities." Mary felt her legs grow weak. In 2 days her life had gone from absolute despair to what? She still couldn't fully believe what was happening. "It's not just that," William continued. "Remember what I said about repaying your kindness in ways you couldn't even imagine?" "I remember. Our company will make a complete investment in this station. Complete renovation, new equipment, inventory, marketing. You will become our regional partner for fuel distribution." "But I don't have the money to be anyone's partner." "You don't need money," William said. "You have something much more valuable. Integrity, courage, and a kind heart. These are qualities that cannot be bought." "There's one more thing," William said, his expression even more serious. "During our investigation, we discovered that Richard had made an anonymous tip about criminal activity in the area. That tip reached us, but he was killed before we could make contact." Mary felt tears forming in her eyes. Richard tried to do the right thing. He tried and he succeeded. His tip is what led us to these criminals. Richard didn't die in vain, he was instrumental in getting them arrested today. Your husband was a hero, Mary. And now you are a hero too, for having the courage to help a stranger when you had no obligation to do so. Peter, who had listened to the entire conversation in silence, approached William. "Did you know my father?" William knelt down to the boy's level. "I didn't know him personally, Peter. But I know he was a very brave man who tried to do the right thing even though he knew it was dangerous. And I know he loved you, your sister, and your mother very much." "Will he ever come back?" Anna asked, coming closer too. William looked at Mary, silently asking permission to answer. She nodded with tears in her eyes. "No, little one. Your daddy won't be coming back. But his love for you is still there. he said, placing his hand on his chest. And now you have lots of new uncles who will take care of you. The 70 bikers approached, forming a semicircle around the family. It was a surreal image, tough men, scarred by life, but with kind eyes directed at the 2 orphaned children. That's right, said Colonel Bill. From today on you're part of our family. If you ever need anything at all, just call any one of us. Sergeant Newton took 2 small metal plates from his pocket. These are our contact numbers. Keep them with you at all times. If anyone tries to hurt you or your mother, call any of these numbers. William stood and looked directly at Mary. I want to make a solemn promise to you in front of these men. Your family will never be in need again. Never again will it be threatened. And if you ever need anything, no matter what, no matter when, we will be here. Exactly, William replied. You did what any decent person should do. But unfortunately, so few people actually do. You gave me back something I thought I had lost forever. What? Faith in human goodness. The certainty that there are still truly good people in the world. New Times. 6 months after that memorable day, Mary barely recognized her own life. Where once there had been an abandoned gas station and empty shelves, now stood a thriving shopping complex that had become a landmark for the entire region. The station had been completely renovated. State-of-the-art pumps, a modern convenience store with quality products, a small restaurant that Mary had decided to manage herself, and even a space for community events. The region, which was previously known only as a place of passage, was now a destination. People came from neighboring towns not only to fill up, but to visit the gas station. Mary, as he had become known. That life has a mysterious way of connecting people who need each other. You showed up here in my moment of greatest despair, but in truth, I also showed up in your moment of needing to have your faith in humanity restored. The 70 bikers had truly become an extended family. They took turns visiting, always bringing little gifts for the children, always checking to see if Mary needed anything. Have you ever experienced a situation where your kindness was unexpectedly rewarded? Or have you ever been instrumental in turning someone's life around? Share your story in the comments. You could inspire thousands of people. Thank you for watching until the end. Subscribe to the channel, share this video with your friends, turn on the notification bell, and we'll see you in the next video, where we'll once again discover together the transformative power of human kindness.